Looks like we have a quorum. Excellent. I'll call us to order. So Wendy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And you're on.
Okay. So I wanted to, come tonight and give you just a overview of the available funds that you have in the CPA fund, what you have available to appropriate for the special town meeting. We can talk about some of the debt that you have that's still outstanding, cumulative revenues, and the articles that are being proposed for town meeting. So.
And did you want me to share the screen? Yeah, hold on. Who can share? It says all panelists can share right now.
Okay, so.
Do you see the green button?
Share.
There we go.
Yep, there it's coming. There it is. Look at it.
Beautiful.
Okay, so let me just how's that? Can you see the that second column?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, because on my screen I can't really see it because I've got everybody lined up on the side. Just hide that. Okay, so so the Community Preservation Fund has been in existence. Fiscal 2002 was the first year that we started levying the surcharge. And I thought it would be good to give you a little history of the cumulative revenues that the fund has taken in since that time. So it's been, 20 years. We're now in year 21. I'm not 20 years, sorry. It's been 18 years. We're now in year 19. So since the beginning, the fund has taken in over $27 million, which is incredible. And a good part of that also was from the state trust fund match, which was great. There was a lot of foresight from members that wanted to get the CPA, the Community Preservation Act, passed in town to get in on that state trust fund distribution, because there were several years that we were able to get a full 100% match of the surcharge. And then, other communities started figuring things out, and a lot of people ended up adopting the Community Preservation Act. But still, $369,000 is what we received in fiscal 20 from the state, and that was a combination of 2 distributions. So that's still a lot of money to get in for community preservation purposes. So fiscal 2020 ended with collections of over $1.8 million, which is great also. And of that, as you can see, we had $1.3 million from the surcharge, $369,000 from the state trust fund, and then there was also investment income of $131,847. So in terms of what is available for the special town meeting, your undesignated fund balance, which would be your fund balance free and clear of any reservations for like other articles, money you haven't spent. The free and clear amount is $5,302,667, which is a pretty healthy fund balance. And then you also have available to spend, if you needed it, the annual budgeted reserve for fiscal 21 of $304,137. And basically that's an amount in the fiscal 21 budget that you would be able to appropriate, like I said, so if you had needed it for any of your projects. But right now you've only got 3 articles for the special town meeting, so you could just appropriate everything from fund balance, or you could do a combination of using available funds and borrowing for those articles. So your total available for appropriation, $5,606,804. You've got 3 articles that are on the warrant, on the draft warrant for community preservation projects. You've got the Unionville Field revitalization, 320,000, Wheaton Farm Barn, 190,000, and then the town hall restoration for $1,450,000. So that total comes to $1,960,000. You certainly would have enough money if you wanted to spend, to use your undesignated fund balance to pay for all of these projects. But, you know, the town hall project is a pretty substantial project. You could certainly borrow for that. Borrowing rates, interest rates are very, very low right now. You're looking at, in some cases, effective rates of less than 1%. So the borrowing is really, it's a good time to borrow. And by doing that, instead of spending down all of your fund balance, you know, that just leaves more money available for you to leverage in the future, should other projects come your way that are significant. I know that for a while there was some land purchases that the committee had put aside, that they were always, you know, had in the back of their mind that they would be a top priority to purchase. So, you know, if you wanted to leverage as much funds as you could, or, you know, keep as much money in the fund as possible, then you could borrow for the town hall project. Or you could do a combination too. You could borrow $1 million and, you know, do 450,000 from available funds. You could do any combination of those things.
Okay.
So the next thing I wanted to just bring up would be your outstanding debt. So there have been 4 debt issuances from the fund. You got the Dean Street land, Chestnut Street land, and the fields. There was a preservation restriction for the Governor Ames estate, and then the Gill property. So the total outstanding on that is $4.4 million. Your debt service for fiscal 21 is $513,000. And then I also put the final year of payment, so you could see, you know, get a sense of, you know, how long we would still be paying on these for. So the Governor Ames estate is going to be the most soon to be paid off, followed by Dean Street, then Chestnut Street, and the Gill property. And that's really all I have in terms of slides for tonight.
I
But
think,
basically, you know, you have a very healthy fund balance. You know, you can certainly do all of these projects out of your available funds if you wanted, but certainly you could keep more money in your fund, you know, more money to earn interest on and to leverage for in the future should something, you know, really significant come up. You could certainly borrow for the town office project if you
I
want.
think the intention was to leverage the town hall project and pay the others. That's my understanding.
That would be my recommendation.
Any comments on Wendy's presentation?
I remember that discussion, and I totally agree with that. Wendy, that was great. Simple, clean, great refresher of where we stand. So what would our balance be now with that leverage?
With that leverage, so hold on a moment. So I'll go back to my slideshow.
It's like 4,800,000, I think, taking the current spending
Yeah.
for Unionville or Wheaton Farm out.
I think that's a great plan. I don't like to take too much, me personally, out of that available fund, as you had mentioned, Wendy, earlier, about future properties. You never know when they're going to pop.
Right. Right. So if you borrowed for the town hall, then actually you could do 2 things. So that only leaves the Unionville Field revitalization and Wheaton Farm, that's only 510,000, and your available funds are
Below.
5.6.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and your fund balance is like 5.3. However, one thing I wanted to also mention is at the annual town meeting, there were no projects being proposed. And without those projects, you were required to reserve money for historic preservation. And the amount that I have in that balance in total is 186,905. I mean, that would mostly cover the Wheaton Farm barn. So
we have
essentially,
$14,000 that have been already authorized in a previous town meeting for Wheaton Farm barn. Could that be put forward? That would just about
Yes.
cover it.
yes. So between those two amounts, you could cover that project, and really you'd only be taking 320,000 out of your fund balance.
That sounds even better to me.
That does bring up a good point, though, because I did want to mention that there are a number of projects. I've been talking to Wayne and Stephanie about that, and there's a number of projects that still have balances that were not fully spent. I'm carrying them on the books. They're not included in that unreserved fund balance number. So that's about like another 200,000. So I know over the course of this year, they're going to be looking at that and proposing to close some of those out and reappropriate those probably at the annual town meeting for other projects.
What were
Yeah,
those?
And Wendy, just so you know, that's actually the next item on the agenda. So I have that list to
Oh, good.
share with the committee, and we can talk about some of those projects and what the committee would like to see and take
Very good.
action on them. There are some that I know have finished up, and so that money should be reallocated back in, like the land survey for the Gill property. And the Children's Museum never moved forward on an aspect of one of their projects that they had proposed.
Very good. Yeah, I would also recommend too, going forward, that when projects are approved, that maybe an expiration date be put on them, or have applicants have a certain amount of time, whether it be a year or 2 years. It can vary depending on the nature of the project. And then at that point, if the funds are not expended, then it would be on the applicant to apply to you for an extension.
I think we discussed that, and I'm sure we'll be bringing that up on our agenda after this. It's a great.
Thank you very much, Wendy. I really appreciate that.
No problem. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
So other questions before Wendy leaves us? Okay, thank you.
All right.
John.
Thank
So we
you.
move,
Thank you, Wendy.
Very much.
Good night.
Thank you, Wendy.
All right, thank you, Wendy.
we move to the second item, which is the status of the outstanding projects.
I do have a question before we move on. Does this group need to actually take a vote to recommend that town hall be funded through borrowing?
That's never been done before, has it? Or
No?
I don't think it needs to be done. I mean, you've communicated that that's what you wish to do, and
I think that's sufficient. We've not done that in the past, I know.
I agree with that also, yeah.
Okay.
We all voted on this at the meeting.
Okay.
okay, I'll bring up the list.
So if my eyes wander to my right, I'm looking at my screen, so I'm reading that also.
What are you reading?
Our minutes and so forth and so forth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying you could read my
No, no.
screen and I hadn't even shared it
Just
yet.
looking at the agenda, the projects and so forth.
Okay. So you should be able to see now the list of, this is from the report that Wendy did for us, I think last month we had it, and she listed out all the projects that currently are outstanding. And I've highlighted the ones that we,
Wendy, Stephanie, that is not what's on our screen.
Right.
what
that
is,
was for-
do you have the wrong thing again? This happened to me earlier. I am sorry about that.
It's okay. It was originally, but then it kind of
I thought
flipped.
it disappeared.
Yeah, because I moved it over, so I'm not looking sideways at people. Let's try it again. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so the first one on the list is the Children's Museum this was way back in 2012. And I believe this was for the doors and other work that they decided they did not want to proceed with because the committee was looking for a preservation restriction.
Right.
But in any case, they did do some work, it was done, and the other two projects are outstanding. And my thought was maybe the board on this one would consider sending a letter to the Children's Museum, just indicating that this money has been set aside for 8 years with no activity. And unless you hear, either to Wendy's point, you can either say, unless you hear otherwise, we'll consider this defunct project.
Right. I would
Or
by year end,
yeah.
so that we have a definite timeline.
Yeah, we definitely have to address this with these timelines because that's ridiculous to keep these going this long when we could be putting this towards other projects.
I think the end of the year is a bit short because I was on the Children's Museum board at the time, and there were definitely extenuating circumstances affecting the project that would take a while. If they are going to move forward, it would take a while to unravel. So they may have abandoned it and not told us. I haven't been on the board for several years, but I do recall that it was a pretty sticky situation.
I think the deadline is simply to respond.
Okay.
If they have, other intentions, just let us know.
Yes,
Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah. very reasonable.
Okay, I'm just sticking. So there are the two there, and the letter would cover both
Address
of
it.
those. The Wheaton Farm barn, and I think Wendy may have mentioned this. I was taking some notes, but this is the money that was originally allocated for the barn repairs before we found out that we had to go through the whole procurement process and have design specs. And then that the cost to do that under the procurement laws was going to be substantially more than we estimated. I think and again, Wendy may have mentioned this when she was speaking, but maybe the board should consider rolling this into the amount that they're asking for at special town meeting.
Right.
So-
I think that's something we can do with formality. So rather than have it kind of float off into the distance, why don't we do that right now? Can I hear a motion to take this $14,850, which was intended for Wheaton Farm barn repairs, and put it towards the current warrant article?
So moved.
I'm sorry, so let me just be clear. So we're not adding this to the 190, I believe, correct?
No,
We're deducting it from the 190.
that's right.
Okay, yeah.
Do I have a second?
Second,
And that was
Dennis.
Dennis. Thank you, Dennis. All right.
So, to be clear, then I'm hearing we would revise the draft warrant article to reduce the 190 by 14,850.
I think that would be appropriate. Or what do you think, Stephanie? These are monies already intended.
I'll talk to Wendy about whether we need to do that or she can just roll this in. And the 190 is what you're looking, what you're funding.
Okay.
Yeah. So Wayne, we can follow up on that.
Well, it would be up to 190 anyway. So if it wasn't,
Right.
then it would not be expended.
But it's not adding to the 190. So.
But right. And I think we just need to make sure and make clear that these monies are moving towards that
Right.
project.
Yes.
Is everyone clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Carter, Mr. Chairman, was the motion to take the 14,850, which was intended for the Wheaton barn, and move to the special town meeting article for this year?
No,
No, it's to move it. It's to apply it towards that $190,000 request. And Tish, we can go over that
Right.
in
It's
the
just
minutes if there's,
to be very clear that this was for the same purpose. And rather
right,
than having this sit out there forever, not applied, we would formally apply it towards the new project.
Thank you.
Okay.
okay. Queesit fire protection.
Wait, I think we need to take a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you did already.
No, we have a motion with no vote yet. So somewhat, well, I'll just say Lee, aye, and follow.
John, I.
hands aye.
Sheedy,
aye.
Sheedy, aye.
Each aye.
Lundin, aye.
Okay, that's everyone. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Queesit fire protection, Wayne and I have been talking about this. This was for the Queesit house. And again, it's similar to the museum. We need to get in touch with UMA and kind of find out what's going on with that. We'll probably get back to the board at the next meeting.
Is that
Right,
an issue
right, Wayne?
also of not wanting the what is it, deed restriction?
My understanding is they had to replace the roof as a more urgent priority. And I think that bumped their timeline and possibly some of their funding. But I don't know. That's speculative on my
Might-
part.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, just have them get back to us. That would be, again, we just need to understand what their intentions are.
The big chunk.
Yes.
The next item is the Pine Grove Cemetery Plan. And I don't know if anyone on the committee has any familiarity with that project. I know a while back, while Melanie was still with us, that they were part of CPA was funding development of a master plan for the cemetery so that it could be, additional plots could be located and sold. And I don't know what's happened since. One of the other folks that was on the commission, the cemetery commission, was a town employee and has since left the employee of the town. So I don't know what the status is.
I think Tim Hurley is part of that, Stephanie. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I believe he's the chair, actually.
Yeah, I think he is.
Okay, so we can check in with Tim on
Yeah.
that. I'm wondering if the funds were expended for the study in the plan, and this is a remainder amount.
Yeah, I don't recall what the
Me neither.
authorization was. That was a while.
Alley's Park, there is $5,000 remaining in that grant. I know that we saw, the park's been completed, and I believe we received all the invoices. They came in a little bit, we get some late ones, but there's still an amount left. Meredith, do you know anything? Is there anything else that the park had done?
No, I think the last thing that we were discussing was possibly putting in a shed for some of, any of the materials for T-ball or whatnot. But I'd have to revisit it, to be honest. Check in with Steve. So you're saying that there's 5,000 left from Alley's Park?
That's what we're showing. And
Okay.
I know from talking with Dan Daly, as I said, towards the end of completion of the park, there were a few invoices that kind of, I want to say piddled in over time. And I'm pretty sure the last one we received, she told me that was the last invoice.
Okay. Yeah, I can touch base. It's been a little bit since I've talked
Yep.
about Alley's Park, but I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Wayne is trying to check in and talk with Frank Menino on the Historical Society. That 40,000 was the amount to cover their master plan for HVAC, Wayne, and repairs. Oh, we lost your
There we
voice.
go. I'm going back and forth between screens. Yeah, they hired a firm to do the plans and specs for their HVAC, as you said, their vault, their fire protection system. They paid an invoice get back on my screen. Well, anyway, apparently it just doesn't want me to see it. There it is. In February of this year. So earlier this year. And then of course, everything shut down shortly thereafter. So yes, as you said, I will check back in with Frank Menino to see what updates he has.
And then the last item I have highlighted is the 524 Depot Street land survey. And I will double check with Andrea to make sure that all those bills were submitted. We closed that out. The committee presented their report to the select board back in December, and I have not heard of any unpaid invoices, but I will double check with her. But I would, again, that's when I would recommend that the board instruct Wendy to close out if there aren't any other unpaid invoices that we
What about
are
this
aware
little,
of.
I'm sorry, Stephanie, what about this little piddly one for 203.84 from Oaks Ames? What is
Wayne and
that?
I have been talking about that one.
Is that coffee money?
I'm also curious about the Oaks Ames fire alarm because my recollection that it was extraordinarily urgent and
Yeah.
the expenditure doesn't make it seem so.
The Oaks Ames fire alarm came in at significantly less money than they thought it would. So I believe we can circle back with Frank and confirm. I know that it has been installed, it is up and running, it passed its inspection with the fire department.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I think we check in and confirm that, like, yeah, we're done, and recapture everything else. I don't know if they need to do additional related electrical upgrades to support it that they haven't done yet, but that's a question. But yeah, I suspect it can come back. Yeah.
Catch it.
All good things. Well, thank you, Stephanie.
Okay.
And now we move on to the plan. And I'm trying to read my, hang on one second, I'm going to turn a light on. It's gotten dark in my room.
Can I make a suggestion? Jim, going back to that list, is if we can put a date beside each one when they were,
I can't read my notes. Okay, so.
You want me to bring it back up?
yeah, no, if you could, just a suggestion, if we can put a date beside each one of those in the future, so we could just kind of get an idea, okay, this has been hanging around 2 years, 5 years, 10 years.
There were dates.
Oh, I think you didn't realize they were listed in chronological order, and the town meeting date that it was approved
Okay.
actually appeared there. So the ones closer to the top had, I think, a 2012 date, I think was the earliest.
Right.
And right down 2015, and then we had a couple on the 2019 that I hadn't highlighted.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're on the CPA plan. Before
So,
one of the things that I wanted to add to the plan was something that Wendy said in her presentation, which was the amount of state match, the total match, which her slide said was very substantial.
I'm not sure I understand.
you want
'Cause
me to bring,
it changes over time.
Right,
It
I
varies from
understand.
year to year, yeah.
But I'm talking about, she has a summary at the end of the report.
Oh, appendix, whatever that is,
Yes.
appendix, yeah, okay.
Yes. And to identify the total amount of state money that has been put forward to Easton, I think it's an impressive amount. I think it's important to have in there and highlight.
do you want me to go to that page?
I think it's the very last page, or it could be done in the explanation somewhere, but I was trying to find the number and it was
I wrote it down.
almost 8 million. 7983021 is what she had.
I think that might fit better in the explanation, the text part, rather than the appendix, which is kind of a financial snapshot,
Okay.
I think. Yeah, we could add like a line in the narrative about the state match, yeah.
Other than that, I think it was excellent. So I'd like to hear other comments or changes, please.
Took the words right out of my mouth. Wayne, you did a great job.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, you did.
I learned things that happened before my time. I thought it was extraordinarily helpful and informative.
Oh, thanks.
I thought it was excellent as well, as I said last month. Wendy raised a question about having a section in the application that would say you have X number of years to expend your money before you have to reapply. Is there any way we could add that in?
Yes, that's a good catch, and I think we should. So first, we'll add something in the narrative about the cumulative state match over time, which is an impressive metric. And then second, to Ed and Wendy's point, we should have something in the narrative of the application process that projects will have a sunset, which could vary depending on the nature of the project. But some sort of affirmative obligation to demonstrate forward momentum with a sunset clause for recapture or affirmative extension upon proving need. I can sort of wordsmith that to sound a little more graceful. But yeah, we should definitely mention that.
I think the main thing I'd like to have people think about is the comments that talk about our priorities.
You want me to go to that section, Jay? Jim?
Yes, please. Land acquisition, historic preservation, recreation. Does anyone see anything there that they feel should be
Oh,
changed?
that's the wrong section. Wayne, can you give me a keyword to search on
Oh,
so I can jump there quickly?
no, priorities?
Okay, that's all right. That's fine. I think it is prayer. That looks
Yeah,
like
you're-
I'm getting too far.
You're a focused target person, and I may hunt around until I find
Well,
that
here we
person.
go. We have historic resource priority. There we go. They're
Cool.
right there. So these are the open space priorities, which are Clover Valley. And I think most of these, I would guess that the committee would agree they still stand. Clover Valley, Howard Farm, which is the Bertarelli property, if I'm not mistaken, over off Church Street. And I think it's Sweet Meadow Farm it backs up to as well. The Marshall Farm, which is on on Elm Street,
Elm
right?
Street Extension,
And
yes.
Elm Street, yeah. Langwater Farm, which is in the Ames Realty Trust, and then the McCarthy property on Center Street, which has that beautiful federal style hip roof colonial. And also has a conservation restriction that's held by the NRT.
My recollection, just within the last year, I was talking with actually Alice McCarthy. I thought that the children had moved back into that home, and I thought it was a non-issue, that they weren't even considering that in the future, but might be something to check into.
Well, it should probably stay on the list because, Alice is getting up there in years.
Okay, so there are no changes to the land priority.
No.
Then the recreational priorities are again a little more broad. That what the CPC should be looking at are underserved areas, and then opportunities to implement the 524 Depot Street Master Plan. And that was a mix of not so much active, the potential for some active recreation there with passive recreation and walking trails and having activities that would be geared towards all ages.
Right. Well, there's the opportunity for trail development there.
Right.
Where does that stand, Stephanie?
So I mentioned earlier that the 524 Depot Street Master Plan Committee presented their findings and recommendations to the Select Board in December. So by way of your asking that question, it seems that we probably should, while that group is now disbanded, their charge was up actually back in June of last year and was extended just until December. But we should probably go over that plan at our next meeting, Jim, just to share it with the committee.
That would be fine. I think if there are recommendations, they probably should come through the rec committee, I would think. I mean, it's not something that we would initiate, but certainly we can review the plan.
Yeah, I think just being familiar with what the recommendations are, that's
Right.
all I was suggesting.
Right. And to remind people, I was the representative for that committee from CPC.
I in no way am married to this idea, but looking at the recreational priorities, I know that there's been a lot of conversation with various projects being proposed and zoning and such. Would it and I don't know if it is or not, to have some sort of like trail connectivity and public access to conservation lands. It seems like some of the town's conservation lands are less connected to actual, streets or to each other. And I don't know if that would be a useful thinged monument here.
That's something that was brought up in the Envision Easton master plan.
Yeah.
And it was also brought up in the Depot Street plan.
Yeah.
That there is some
Yep.
possibility for linking north-south trails into Wheaton Farm and perhaps even connecting up. I personally would like to see a rail trail
That would be
down
neat,
the old
yeah.
rail track.
Yeah. Would it be, would a bullet point here be useful for that? Or a little too detailed? And
I think that's a broad, I mean, the rail trail may be.
not the rail trail
very
specifically, but
specific,
just
but
trail
having-
connectivity and access.
I wouldn't go too much more than that if you're gonna do it, because again, it's very broad. You could go on and on and on with bullets on that. I mean, how
Yeah.
long has you've had that property? Seems like forever.
Which property?
The Gill property?
Oh, I'm not talking about Gill. I'm just talking generally throughout town.
Yeah.
Just access and connectivity. There are some large open space properties that are close to places, but really hard to get to from them.
I like the idea, Jim, of the rail trail, but who knows what's gonna happen with that? I don't see it in my lifetime, but I remember 20 years ago, oh, for sure, that's going through.
Maybe a bullet that, projects that connect open space, connect open spaces to each other and to better public access. Something as broad as that.
Great, yeah, it's a great idea.
Okay.
I remember even discussing it going right through the borderland.
There, on the recreation side, again, other than, encouraging applications for underserved areas, there's nothing really talking about active recreation needs. Meredith, can you speak to what the Recreation Commission, are there needs that you folks are hearing about that might be priorities?
I'd be honest, it's just the year is so disjointed that I have a hard time, speaking to any of these points. Our meetings are like this and they're just to really not be able to, I just don't feel comfortable. We didn't, the rec board didn't have a meeting until I think our first one was June or July. I mean, we've only had one, I think maybe two. We do have one coming up, but we weren't allowed to have Zoom meetings until that point. So I don't really want to speak to it until I feel comfortable talking with the board.
Yeah.
And I apologize here. I'm having to do 2 Zoom meetings because I have one to greet with my child's teacher who I haven't met and doing this. So I'm trying to so please just be patient with me.
I'm impressed with your ability.
At least you're laughing, Meredith. At least you're laughing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
A bottle of wine in your future.
Is that multi-zooming?
Yeah, it is, honest to God.
Meredith, here's the rest of us trying to act so normal and reality really hits. Huh?
That's, yeah, pretty much it. I mean, that's, yeah.
Should there be something in here recognizing that we have an open space and recreation plan that made recommendations?
Yes, that's a good idea, Ed. Absolutely.
No.
Yep.
Yeah. And Wayne, I don't see the need to put anything in the plan relative to connectivity or rail trails. I think that section's fine to me.
Yeah, I would, you do or do not project. So I've got a draft here, projects that connect open spaces to each other and or provide improved public access.
No.
Does that belong here or does that belong under the Conservation Commission since it's mostly their land?
Well, as a recreational priority, if we're trying to improve trails and walking and such,
Okay.
but.
Okay.
And
hard to
those
move
might
it
be
around.
some smaller dollar projects like the, I want to say Deer Meadow, but that's not the
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 rail,
subdivision,
the
the Eagle Scout
bridge,
project.
yeah, the
Yeah.
trail and bridge connector,
Yeah.
yeah.
But also, I think Ed's point about, implementing or acting on recommendations made in the open space and recreation plan.
By the way, I'd love to work on a rail trail project if anybody wanted to do it with me. I think it's a great idea. I know when we did that meet and greet, I forget what we called it, but at Frothingham Hall, there was a gentleman who approached me about that. And I forget who it was, but it was, if we have a roster of who attended, he was a
I
big.
wonder if it was the fellow, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I think he's the chair of the, and I'm not going to get the name right, but it's the Disabilities Committee, the Committee on Disabilities.
Oh,
Accessibility, maybe?
Sutton.
That sounds familiar.
be great. Although I think he had indicated it's a very costly venture to do. So I don't know, we'd have to look at probably grants and
Right.
dig deep on that.
Yep. Definitely a grant project.
And the biggest challenge is getting the easement, from whoever actually owns the thing.
Oh,
Right.
right.
Yeah, and that when I worked for the trustees, we looked at supporting rail trail projects in Metro West, and that was the biggest barrier that slowed everything down for years.
Mm.
Was just the legal status and ownership of these old rail rights of way.
I do it just to keep the train from going across all those level crossings in town.
Yeah.
Uh,
This is just a really wild idea, especially when you've got you actually have the railroad bed there, the old right of way there. But if it might be worth kind of even just looking at some GIS maps to see what the private land ownership is along that rail bed. And this is where John Grant was always very helpful, and start some conversations with private landowners about possibly allowing easements across property.
Is missed. Well, I think Wayne, I think that addition would be fine that you proposed. If others feel differently, say so, please. This is the connectivity comment that he made.
Yeah, so I've got two additions, and I'll clean up the language once I actually type them in there. One, so the two we already have. A third one would be projects that connect open spaces to each other and or provide improved public access or public open space access. And then a fourth bullet point, projects that advance open space and recreation plan recommendations and priorities.
One other thing I think I may have seen is that when the numbers, kind of the accounting numbers shown in your report, I think are dated as of June 30th. Whereas I think the numbers we saw from Wendy tonight may have been dated July 1st. I don't know if it's useful to update that.
I think no. My understanding is, I don't know if the numbers have actually changed. And they do shift around over time as things happen. I think what Wendy does is she brings things forward to July 1. I think that's more of an accounting technicality. Whereas I think the ones in here, and we can certainly circle back and clarify that, but I think the ones reflected here are the end of the fiscal year. So I don't know if there's actually changes between June 30 and July 1.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
And affordable housing. Any changes, comments?
I would note here that unlike the previous one, it makes mention of the fact that it has an action plan, which is important.
Yeah, reference the action plan and housing production plan. Yep.
Do we want to mention the rent relief?
Not as that's sort of a one-off thing. I don't know if it's going to be a durable feature of the affordable housing trust, for the next 5 or 10 years.
Hopefully it doesn't need to be.
That is our fond hope. Yeah. Yeah. Town Houston Housing Authority.
Well,
yeah.
To try to move this forward, one of the things that, if everyone's comfortable with this, I'd propose we adopt this plan and publish it or share it, which would be a posting.
Agreed.
So, yeah. So sort of look through the rest of the priorities and a motion, a second, and vote to adopt, the 2020 community preservation plan pending the revisions discussed.
Actually, I just saw something. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, please.
Stephanie, what's going on, now that the Depot Street is going to be revitalized next spring? Is the Reed House going to be affected by that? I would think that there would be some type of eminent domain on that. Also, that's going to change drastically, that intersection.
Well, Wayne, I think you can talk to that better than I, because I believe you were more involved when the plans were being reviewed.
The Depot Street reconstruction project, way back in, Lordy, 2014, 2016, several years ago, when various ideas were brought to the Historical Commission, and the Historical Commission, had some thoughts on different versions. And so what is moving forward is one of these that was a straw poll of the commission at that time indicated could be the best way forward for it. Long story short, I believe they are taking some of the front yard of the Reed House and shifting the right of way, I think primarily for the sidewalk, and they will rebuild the stone wall. The Reed House itself remains in poor and deteriorating condition, and with so far not much success with outreach to the owner for a better outcome.
I was hoping, because of the Depot Street reconstruction, that maybe that might give a push to the owner to do something.
Yeah, that I think is more productively an offline conversation to try and advance that conversation.
Well, I think a lot of people have tried to have a conversation with the owner, and I know the fire department feels that it is a hazard. I think many of you probably noticed that it has the red X on it, that if a fire were to develop, that the fire department would not enter the building. They don't consider it safe for them to enter it in that situation. And I know Chief Partridge mentioned just recently that they had tried to reach out and have some conversations with the owner and received no response. And I know that there are members of the community that have tried to have conversations and advance some kind of change of hands so that the structure could be preserved and rehabilitated for another use.
Regarding this eminent domain issue, and not specifically related to the Reed House, but I was recently reading the CPA legislation, and it seems, if I was reading it correctly, that the CPC has the right of eminent domain. You might want to check that one out.
So that's interesting. And what would the committee do with that right? Because once you take over a property, you need to do something with it.
Well, there's, again, not being specific on one particular property, but I mean, there has been talk in the past of taking a building, finding someone that would upgrade that project to create affordable housing, let's say, or some need in the community.
Yeah.
And it's just a power that I never knew that we have. And if I'm reading it correctly, that's an interesting thing. We don't have to wait for somebody else to do something for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Are we on the historical commission now? In this part of the
historic resources priorities?
yeah, a couple of things. Once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away, the historical commission had a historic preservation plan, and it's been more than 5 years since that's been done, I believe. Is there any move to have the commission upgrade that, which may
no, there is affirmatively not a move, and it, I believe, was done in 2009. I remember within the last 2 years, the commission talked about it, and the discussion at that time was it remains broadly relevant, and it would be a more productive use of commission members' time to continue advancing the priorities rather than redo a plan that still remains broadly relevant.
Well, I would, first of all, I would beg to differ with them. Maybe
Yep.
I appear at a meeting, but we, the CPA, have paid a lot of money to do historic house surveys.
Yep.
And none of those houses have been added to this list of priorities, including the oldest house in town, which is now in play because it is up for sale. The owner passed away. So I think it's long past due that they should at least consider adding language or upgrading, putting an addendum in the 2009 plan, because I don't think this is protecting necessarily all the priority properties in town. Just my opinion.
When you say this, what is the this in that
This
sentence?
particular paragraph here.
So Ed, are you talking about the whole section? Because again, it doesn't include any reference to the newly inventoried or the more recently inventoried properties.
Right, exactly.
I mean, yeah, it sounds like what Ed is saying, and it might make sense, Wayne, for the historical commission to consider doing an update. And that probably would be fairly easy if it was well-defined what you wanted in the update plan, so that you don't have someone trying to, they start opening up and end up rewriting the whole thing. But I mean, to Ed's point, how many properties have been inventoried?
I don't know, a couple hundred probably.
Yeah.
More than that.
Yeah. And that would.
I can't believe that was 2009.
I think it was 2009, I believe.
I was on the.
It was.
Okay.
It was that long ago, John.
Wow.
I remember one of the strategic planning meetings the historical commission had at Oak Ames Memorial Hall. One night to go over that.
I think it's a good idea to revisit it and possibly put a bullet in there.
Revisit it. What is the it?
Your historic preservation plan.
And a bullet. What is the bullet?
The bullet
It-
would be to say something similar to what we agreed to for the Recreation Commission, you know, to seek projects pursuant to recommendations in the plan. But an 11-year-old plan doesn't really help you in this particular instance here, I don't think.
Okay, so you're saying backwards then. You would like to see a bullet here in this CPA plan referencing priorities and recommendations of the historic preservation plan.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
And you put nudge, nudge in there somewhere.
Did you say a nudge?
Nudge, yeah, NUDGE, yeah.
I agree with Stephanie. We have a list of houses. It wouldn't take more than a meeting or two to simply go through the houses and sort of update that particular section of the plan.
Well, not hearing a lot of other information at this moment, are we comfortable with those changes, adopting the motion that Wayne read to us? Could I have a motion to accept this plan and publish it?
Motion to accept.
Second,
Okay, Lee, aye.
hands eye.
Ventresco, aye.
Barilla, I.
Lundin, I.
Meredith, are you with us? You must
Sheedy,
be.
aye.
Yes.
Yeah, I think she's
Zooming.
yeah,
She's meeting with
Okay.
people.
multitasking.
Okay, that's fine. We'll have her as,
Abstaining.
right. Okay. That took us a while, didn't it? I mean, considering when we started this project.
Had to be done, and again, well done. Kudos to all.
Yeah, Wayne did a
Yes.
nice job of writing this. up.
Yes, thanks, Wayne. That was
Thank you.
very helpful.
Hard work.
Thank you very much.
You went from an A+ to an A+++.
Oh my gosh,
Wow.
that never happens.
No, no teacher would ever give an A+ to begin with. People get smug. Okay, so we have some minutes to decide upon. The first being August 13th executive session minutes, which were shared electronically.
Jim, I'm not trying to drag out the meeting, but we did have review, another item before the minutes on the agenda.
Ooh, I skipped something? Okay.
Review proposed revamped project submittal and monitoring process.
Ah, okay. I made notes and I made a mistake, so I'm sorry. I don't have a printer here, so I can't print. So writing is terrible.
A-.
Yeah, that's like a D. Okay, so we go to that then. And this is relative to our new plan, which you just accepted, which has more responsibility for us as individual members in kind of adopting some of these projects that come forward and helping with moving them through the hoops, interacting with the other committees, the historical commission, the rec commission, whoever's appropriate to be an intermediary and provide information and a recommendation on a project, and finally through completion and review at the end of that. So Stephanie, do you want to say a few things or what?
I'll start and then I'll also let Wayne, because Wayne really worked closely on this, but When we started the reboot last year, there was definitely talk about, one, helping applicants through the process to make sure that when they're submitting an application and it's ready for the committee to review, that there's sufficient information to really make a good decision about the project. And that would include exactly what the project covers and what the costs are, and really getting a much better sense of those costs. And as having and as I understand it, what's been discussed through this process of rewriting the application process. Well, and I'll jump back for a minute, and then monitoring the projects going forward a little more closely than has happened in recent years. I know when we were first working on the library, and then some of the repairs at Oak Sames Memorial Hall, but in particular the library. I know Greg Gaylor was on hand frequently to go and look at repair work that had been done, restoration work, and make sure that was done to certain standards. And I know we don't have historic preservationists necessarily on the committee, but helping to make sure that projects are advancing and are moving forward, and having the project proponents come and give updates periodically was part of what was discussed. So what is, and this is where I'm going to turn it over to you, Wayne, if you have anything more to add, but what is the role of committee members in that process, and the commitment, and then how do we keep it moving forward?
Yeah. That's pretty much it. First up is how do we get better applications, which then can be better projects. So we're going to have to work more closely with prospective applicants as they get applications together. So that's our sort of revised, roughly year-long, solicitation, interest, invitation, and really working with applicants. And it may well turn into a two-step project where their first step is actually they need to plan and get better plans and specs and budgets, especially for these construction projects. And then that would yield a project that once it moves to construction, and these are overwhelmingly projects that are building something, you have better metrics and you can see how it's performing against these metrics that were in the application. What the phases of the work are, if it's moving ahead. And then part of having a successful project at the end of it, I think, is having a much closer relationship with a CPC member who is really involved in how the project is going and understands any of its idiosyncrasies, and can be the bridge between the CPC and the people who are carrying out the work, the actual grant awardee, as a way of ensuring that projects meet the expectations and goals that the CPC had in funding it at the beginning.
I think this is a great idea and overdue. Perfect example of something that's really gone off the grid for quite some time would be the Smith farmhouse. And I think we should have been monitoring that, and it kind of got away from us. With that said, maybe we can draw up a form of some kind with some bullets to start out with, maybe very simple, and then have each, whether it be recreation, historical, whatever it may be, housing, and have a form for that and have a checklist of some basic things to start off with, where we could go in, monitor it. I don't know, depending on how fast they're moving, they might be moving right away, or this might be a 6 month or a year project, but check in, have the contact with the project, be checking in with them, and then do updates to the CPC. I think it's a great idea, because I think we've kind of lost control a little bit of that, to no fault of anyone. It's just, we didn't have it on our radar.
And I think it would be helpful to have that relationship between a CPC member and the applicant during the application process, so you can make sure that what actually is getting proposed to do is implementable and monitorable for you. And having that relationship so you can, support them through the process and somewhat, tailor what that check-in process looks like depending on the project. But yeah, I think that would be just super helpful. So it doesn't turn into this 3 steps removed. It's like, what is going on?
Right.
And, if people are unhappy, please, check in and make that known.
Do you think it makes sense for the members of the CPC who are affiliated with another town committee and have developed expertise? So, recreation, dealing with a recreation project, but with respect to at-large members, some of them have extensive expertise with historic and other things, and others don't. So I have that concern. And my second concern is in having a member of the committee be overly involved in the application process. I think opens the door for a lot of misunderstanding when the applicants say, well, I did what Amanda told me to do, and here we are at the committee. We don't speak with one voice, and we can't guarantee an outcome, and it seems to lend an air. I have a concern about that occurring.
Yeah,
I'd second that as well. That would be a concern for me. The other aspect of that is if you work closely on a project, you're likely to become an advocate of that project, and that somehow seems to that affects your vote. So I'd like to find a way to avoid that.
I think the monitoring is entirely appropriate.
Yeah, but during
So
the process. So what I'm hearing is that a better take or spin on this would be, once a project happens, then someone would be their sort of like the project buddy, the project captain. They would be the CPC person really checking in as the project moves forward. But during the supporting and developing the application process, it would be more the CPC as a whole meeting and offering advice and guidance. The thing I'm trying to get away from is we get projects and applications that get developed or submitted that are really difficult to have happen in a constructive and successful way. And, maybe the staff is kind of caught going, well, what are we supposed to do with this? And the CPC not fully understanding, what got to that point. So how can we give better support and guidance during the application process? Because one of the challenges we have is larger organizations have the capacity to put together these implementable plans and specs and budgets, but then we would not support the smaller sort of mom and pop grassroots volunteer projects that don't necessarily know what they're doing, and
Yeah, I think if I could jump in here,
Yeah,
I think if we look at where there have been some problems, the Smith Farm is particularly one where you had folks that didn't seem very experienced in undertaking a restoration project of this type. And then for a lot of reasons that they provided, it just didn't move forward very well. And some of the work didn't seem to be up to a standard that seemed appropriate for the funding from the CPC. There was another project that Greg had mentioned. It was the restoration of balustrade by the town offices that seems to have not been done up to the standard that someone like Greg, who is a builder, would expect it to be. So when you're, I think on the front end with the helping with the application process, Amanda, I think staff can probably provide a lot of that support and then check in with different members of the committee who might have expertise on a particular project to make sure it's going in the right direction. And I hear what you're saying. I absolutely, I wouldn't have thought of that up front, but yes, I think people will say, well, again, I was guided in that direction and now you're telling me that's not going to work. The whole point is for someone to have a project that when it comes to the committee, it meets one of the priority requirements, if not multiple. It's been well thought out. It's got a good budget associated, a sound budget associated with it. And it's something that we've built support for throughout the process. But then it's the ongoing so other projects we haven't seemed to have had as much problems with. I did mention that when the library was being worked on, Greg Gaylor, who was a member of the Historical Commission, and I think he may have even been the representative for the Historical Commission for a while on the CPC. Am I right in remembering? No. Okay.
No.
But in any case, it was invaluable having him be able to check some of the work.
Stephanie, I think one of the things that Amanda brought up is relevant. I think it's a caveat. I think we have to be upfront with applicants to say that the liaison, which is the role I see between the applicant and the committee, is not someone who's going to make substantive recommendations or facilitate the process. In other words, they don't have the responsibility. They're there to be helpful and to link back to the committee. So I would see the beginning of our meetings in the future having kind of a round robin of give us an update where the project's at now. What do we need to look at? Are there any issues? Can we be helpful? And that can't be done with 9 people. It needs to be done with 1.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, Jim.
The other side, and I'm kind of sad that Meredith is otherwise occupied, because in my mind, she is a prime example of how this works with Ali's part. I think that her role in that was quite useful and facilitative. And I think as this project, as we go forward and consider this, I'd like to have her provide us some input into her thoughts. How do this works well? What are some of the downsides? So anyway, I see anything is fraught with danger, but I think this is in net a benefit. And I don't think you're signing up for an enormous amount of work, but just to be available to link in, check in, and to be that link pin back to the committee. I think whoever has to do the final assessment of any project has to be someone with substantive knowledge and not just a representative. Ed, go ahead.
And I'd like to go back and cover a couple of things. Number one, I think a reason why we need to take more responsibility is if you look at a project like the pickleball court project, that involved, it seemed to involve a large amount of staff time to kind of put that project together. And if we could have done more of that, then that would have been a net plus. Maybe the way to get around the objection that Amanda and I have would be to specifically lay out in writing what the role of the liaison person would be. Let me give you, for instance, that balustrade project that Greg thinks was so terrible. I was the person who worked with the proponent, and the application was good. They had to make a lot of changes. We went step by step, getting the 3 bids, et cetera, et cetera. We shepherded them all the way through to approval. And then no one was given the responsibility of monitoring the project because it was a relatively small project, et cetera, et cetera. So I question the fact that aside from Greg, do we really have anybody on the commission right now that could monitor a large project? And if you look at the historical commission or the conservation commission or the recreation commission, I think we have dedicated volunteers, but I'm not sure we have the expertise to monitor.
Can I jump in on that? I think something that's important to keep in mind is that so many of these projects that are being done, I mean, I can speak to Alley's Park, we'd really never done that before, or Edwin's Park, you know, it had never been done before. I'm speaking about recreation, but so many of the projects that come in front of CPC are just, they're uncharted territory. And so I think it's hard for us to, or will be hard to, I think we're trying to create a system, but systems are difficult to put in place unless you've done them a couple of times. And some of these projects are done and we're never going to get another one, likely, maybe, but probably not under our purview. So I think creating order in this type of situation is going to be difficult. It's just my 2 cents. But, you know, unless another park renovation comes along, or certainly I've talked about wanting to do, you know, playground at RO. I have the experience from Alley's Park. And, you know, certainly we do from the rec board, from doing Edwin's Park. So then we can apply that experience now to pickleball. But again, even with the pickleball, so much as we've never done before. So it's learning right from the beginning. Certainly, I think we all, and to Amanda's original point, that, you know, we all have these bits of experience that we bring to this committee, which is pretty amazing. But the projects themselves, I think it's just going to, I think we need to be comfortable to a certain level of I don't want to say chaos, because it's not chaos, but the word is escaping me of we're just not going to be able to create complete order and structure to a system that is continuously has new projects, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of projects that are pretty idiosyncratic and one-off.
Yeah, well said, Meredith. You know, we're also, in a bigger picture, is we're not the only municipality who's facing these questions. So I'm not volunteering to research into other committees' work and the language that they use and the structure and systems they have in place. But, you know, that is a source that might be useful.
Well, that's what the CPA Coalition website is sort of for, to help us make those contacts. So that's a very good point. We, you know, why should we have to reinvent the wheel if somebody's already done that?
Right, and we just paid to re-up our membership.
Yes.
We could hold the check until they give us some information. That would be good.
I think it's gone.
I agree. I actually agree with all points here. I think we got way ahead of ourselves. I was just thinking that we were just going to be having a representative CPC check in with just the monitoring process. No questions or anything like that until we address the issues that everyone has just mentioned, that you have the expertise, that we don't have one member of CPC the go-to, and then you got, well, he said or she said. That should be addressed to our whole group. And then we make a decision on sending out someone that has that expertise. But we've never had a real monitoring process. The Historical Commission does now, but we never have. And again, not to beat a dead horse, Smith Farm is a perfect example. We should have been monitoring that. We just expel the money, and then who knows, as we can tell just from you know, Wendy's rundown of all the finances, that, you know, this stuff sits around for years or a decade, and we don't know what's going on. I mean, it could be half done, who knows? We lose control of it. So I think we should start out with just the basic of just monitoring and finding out, just checking in, hey, what are you doing, where you stand? And then that person check in with at the next CPC meeting. And then if there's technical issues that are not within the expertise of the member that's going out to monitor, then that should all be brought in to us as a whole and take it from there, because otherwise we're going to run into the problems that Amanda brought up.
And I think something that would be helpful is during the application process to try and identify worthy or viable projects that need more support. A thing we struggle with is that technical expertise question. A lot of these boards and commissions do not have that. There's just a few people in town who could believably be said to have that level of expertise. So what do you do with a grassroots inexperienced group of folks who have a worthy project, but they need better and clearer plans and specs and budgets and a more phased approach? Do you do a planning grant, which then leads to a construction grant? But I'm sorry, Ed.
Ed,
Well,
go ahead.
I think Wayne's raised a good point here. An area where we do have expertise is the application process, because we've worked with every application that's come down the pike. So I think with some strictures on what people can expect from a liaison on the committee, helping them frame the project, I think that's something we could do. I'm not objecting to that. I'm just concerned about some of the same problems that Amanda has. But if we could overcome that, I think that's a very legitimate use for us. Maybe once they get the grant and start to do the project thing, maybe since we do have a lot of downtime in the year, maybe up the number of times that proponents that are using their money have to come in and report what's going on would be significant, and maybe catching something that looks like it may be going wrong in the absence of having a Greg Gaylor or a Greg Strange.
But once the money has been approved at town meeting, what power do we have whatsoever over grantees?
Well, the town has power in the sense that the individuals involved are spending their own money and are reimbursed by the town for the most part. And so they have to demonstrate that they've accomplished what they said they were going to accomplish. This is part of what Wayne is bringing up. That has to be someone with the ability to discern whether it's done properly, particularly relative to historic projects.
And a lot of the construction projects, the town pays the contractor directly upon successful completion of whatever that phase of work is.
And if the work is not successfully completed, you don't pay for it.
Okay.
And then what happens when you're standing out there and person A thinks it's fine and person B thinks it's not?
Well, if I could, I've been around now, I've managed to outlive Lee on this committee. So as the person that was around from the beginning, I think the model project is the Unity Church project.
Yes.
And basically there you had Greg, who was an expert on our side, the historical commission representing us. And then on the other side, you had Jay Thomas as the clerk of the works, the advocate for Unity Church. And then you had proponents that were careful and well prepared. And if there was an issue of, is this the historically appropriate use of our funds, Greg and Jay would get together and talk about it and work it out, and then come back and report to us on that. And there weren't a whole lot of problems like that, but I remember a few. The Beacon project was an even better example of ones. Again, Greg and Melanie were the people that were the point folks there for us. And there were a lot of changes and adaptations and things as we sort of developed that unique project, and ultimately that worked out pretty well.
You know, and there were some things I know Wayne and Tim did some of the inspections recently at Oak Ames Memorial Hall, and you know, the window treatments, right? Wayne, some of the repairs there, which were really obvious. You know, anyone could look at that and say, gee, that really doesn't look like a job well done, which they did, and it was corrected.
Yes, my concern, my additional concern is, and again, I've only been around 2 years. You know, how many of these projects are we redoing our whole system because of
one
isolated incident? One is very recent. Or should we be looking, I mean, if an applicant can't get their act together on their own, it's a pretty good indicator that this might not be a terribly successful project. I mean, we've had high schoolers complete their projects. I don't know how much involvement of staff time that took, but it might be
more than you might think.
it shouldn't be approved.
On some of the stuff. I think you're making a good point, Amanda, because that was one of the things that I was thinking about. And as I'm listening to the conversation, is that how much an applicant struggles with the process could indeed be an indication that they are not well equipped to, for whatever reasons, to complete a project. And how, you know, that raises another question of how do you bring that up? And
Well, that goes back to my initial objection to this. Twofold. To go back to Amanda's last point, I don't think it's one particular project. I think there was a feeling on the part of many people on the committee, including myself, that we had gotten away from a tradition of closely monitoring projects, not just one, but many of them. But my other problem when this process started was I don't want to eliminate those small projects. You know, a large corporate organization or the town or something like that has the wherewithal to make a sacrifice and do the project on their own, maybe shouldn't be getting the money either. Maybe a small time person who is learning while he's doing it is the ideal person. It's their money, for one thing. And I'd hate to see the small projects cut out because we're so worried about expertise. So
They come back.
Small necessarily means unsophisticated necessarily.
But they come back to us. The pickleball court was a perfect example, and so was an Alley's Park. They weren't educated on the process, and you know, we've been at this long enough. These are lay people that come to us, and we worked through the process with them, and we did, and we succeeded. And so that's all part of what we do. I think we're overanalyzing it right now, though. I think that getting back to that point, I think CPC members, we should be attaching ourselves to a project for monitoring only, keep everything else the way it is. Otherwise, we're overstating and overkilling this. The monitoring process right now is the most important. We haven't done that. We did that when we had Greg, as Ed said, with Shovel Shop and with Melanie. That was a big project. I mean, out of all the projects that I can recall, Unity Church was probably the very best. They were meticulous. Their group, I'm trying to think, her name escapes me.
Ellen Deem. Ellen
Yeah,
Deem.
yeah.
And it was very professionally managed.
Phenomenal. Phenomenal.
And they didn't need to be prompted. They came to the Historical Commission, they came to the CPC and did presentations and updates. Anytime they were looking for additional funding, they came and they already had a plan for their match piece. They gave a full update on what had happened, so you knew that progress was being made. And you know, it makes a good point that you don't want to. If someone's unsophisticated, it might be a good project, but again, you need to have a level of comfort that the project is going to be completed successfully.
I think, as John mentioned, I think a key feature with the Unionville Field project was it was a 2-year project. One was a grant to get the plans and the specs and the budget. And then second was construction. So I think where this is, and I know this group had talked about this, and I think reached a broad consensus that some of these smaller, more grassroots projects may well be multi-year projects where the first one is a smaller grant to get your plans, get your specs, come back to us with something more buildable, more implementable for funding in the second year.
Yes, Ed.
I would disagree a little bit with John.
You always do.
No, but you have you have an important point, but I think maybe we should do it in a different way rather than make you responsible for an individual project that's underway, monitoring that project. I think you could achieve the same goal by setting stricter requirements to report to the whole committee.
Yeah, that might be
I think the way to get started is to appoint somebody to shepherd the correct paperwork or whatever you want to say to get the project underway. I think that's a better use of our time. As long as we can overcome the objections that Amanda had way back at the beginning of this discussion.
But now we have more work on staffing to be able to go out to all these different projects and find out what's going on.
well,
And
maybe what that does.
responsibility. I mean, that was one of our bullet points that CPC members were going to take a little bit more hands-on responsibility. And again, we can go over and over this just to do the monitoring, to check in with the applicant. Where are you? Nothing technical, just say, okay, this is it. And then report back to CPC.
Show up to the meeting. Why put the responsibility on you?
Yeah, and maybe this where you're getting to is, and I'm trying to think about a year when you had a lot of projects that went to town meeting for approval, but you can see based on the list, the number of projects that are still outstanding. Maybe you limit the number of projects that get approved to make sure that you have an amount that's manageable for monitoring. And I agree with Ed. I mean, I think you need to get, and we've talked about this, we talked about this last year, is making sure that people come in on a regular schedule, and that gets set up upon the approval. One of the things we've done in the past, and that's worked well with the project, is after projects have been approved at town meeting, we have a form that states how much money they've been approved for. It is the reimbursement form. We sit down, we have a meeting with them. They have to set their milestones, which get captured. And that form has to be filled out and updated on a regular basis. There's no reason you can't say, okay, now you need to come in every 2 months, every 3 months, whatever the project would dictate. I don't think every project necessarily follows the same schedule.
I think it's a great idea, but if we decide on that, then we need to add that into the plan.
Yes, I agree with that. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Can you repeat that, Ed?
I agree with you.
Just giving you a hard time.
It's, every once in a while, the blind squirrel finds the nut.
I think that's a great idea. But as I said, my recommendation.
Well, it is in a sense, it's in the plan because that is identified as the last part of the project. Once it's been approved, you sit down in a meeting and there are standards and guidelines and timelines and points of assessment. All that is planned in. This would just be part of that process. So I don't see we need to adjust the plan.
If I could jump in there,
Yeah.
with a little bit of training from staff on timelines and this, that, and the other thing, outlining the program to somebody and getting them started on it, that would be something we could do. As long as you, I remember Greg going up in a lift to look at the steeple of the church. As long as we're not doing that, I'm fine. If we could help the person lay out the assessment process, that's certainly something that we can develop the expertise in very quickly, I would think.
But to Stephanie's, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry too. Go ahead.
No. But to Stephanie's point, the only time we really see an applicant, if there's an issue, the initial start of the process, and if they want more money, that's it. We don't see them again.
Fred.
So that's why we have to have that monitoring in place, or as Stephanie said, and I like that idea also, where they have to check in, so be it at every meeting. I mean, it's all going to have to be part of this work process if we're going to be expelling, tens or hundreds, thousands of dollars. This is what is expected. So maybe that's the answer, as Stephanie stated. Something has to be done. And I think we're hitting on a lot of great points. I know we want to get this done, the plan. I don't know if it's defined well enough in the plan with several of the ideas that we've just spun around for the last half hour or so.
Well, I think it's all helpful. I think, again, in my reading of what the plan said and what the purpose of the plan is, this doesn't have to be identified in that document. I think it's part of what we do at the final meeting, where we're setting out timelines and deadlines, and this is just part of what is expected. Report back. As a number of people have said, the projects are so diverse. Some projects won't call for this, and others will call for a lot of it. And so that's why I think we leave the flexibility out of the plan. But I do think that all of this conversation has been quite useful. I think it will lead us to having fewer problems in the future. I was thinking that the balustrade, that was on town property, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And-
Oh, was it?
It's right on the edge.
That was the homeowners.
It's in the Summer Hill Parade or whatever the name of that.
Spring Hill.
Spring Hill. Thank you, Spring Hill.
Okay. Are we at a point where we can move on? Do you have what you need, do you think?
So what is our conclusion here?
Well, I think what we need to do is think about this a bit and come back to the next meeting with maybe some bullet points. John's point. Here's kind of what we see coming next. This is how we'd implement this, and then have a further discussion at that point.
Yeah, and
we're not
what our
the
application
projects. Go ahead.
and what the application process looks like for 2021.
Right.
Presumably still the two-step application process with a lot more guidance and oversight, with the understanding that some prospective projects may be two-phase projects, where the first one is a planning grant so they can get their house in order if it's a worthy project. And something that I would really want to see is when there are site visits to check up on work, whatever they are, I really would like to have a CPC member be in attendance at those. I think it just really helps to communicate back to the larger group what that site visit was, what it rather than, you know, sort of hearing it second or third hand.
So you're saying have staff and a CPC member go out? I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, for when we're doing these. I mean, both have the proponents come in regularly for updates by the proponent to the CPC, but when there are site visits or you know, physical check-ins, that, you know, it's not like Wayne is flying solo. And, you know, I think it just really helps for the communication and the understanding if someone from the CPC has that firsthand knowledge and understanding of sort of the facts on the ground and can articulate that back to the group.
Thank you, Wayne. That's really good. I have a question on my screen here. I have this little flashing red button that says recording. Does that mean it's recording for ECAT or can?
Yes.
Oh, so it's not recording the meeting to a computer someplace that we could get a copy of it.
You can from ECAT, yeah.
You can from ECAT. Okay. Okay.
Well, the next three projects that are set for town meeting are all on town property.
They are. And yes. And I would
I just point
we
that
will
out.
have involvement in review for the pickleball court. I'm sure we will.
Right.
That town staff will be involved with, because that is on the parkland.
Right.
And that is a big project being undertaken.
Can I say something about that project?
Yes.
Well, I end up at two places every day. One is Frothingham Park and one is the Beanery across the street from the original pickleball courts. And now that the park, Frothingham Park, has pickleball courts, I don't see the same level of use at Unionville as I used to. I'm wondering, when we look at projects, do we do a overview of, you know, what the possible range of usage is? I'm all in favor of getting more use out of that park. I'm just concerned that there's not enough demand for the pickleball court that they're actually all going to get used. It looked like that was going to happen when we were originally working on the project, and now there are other pickleball courts in town, and I'm not sure there's enough demand to fill them all up.
Just want to jump in on that. The demographic for pickleball also coincides with the demographic that has critically hit our COVID population. So I think that's probably why.
Good point.
Oh, that's a great point. Yes, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. Good point.
I'm the poster child there. So
Yeah.
That's why I'm walking up in the park instead of riding an exercise bike at the gym.
Okay, I'm going to move us to approval of minutes again, hopefully this time properly. So we're looking at the August 13th executive session minutes. First, do I have a motion to accept?
I think you need a motion to release them. Even, you know,
Well,
right, yes.
We have accepted them?
No.
We've never reviewed them, so I think we review first and then second release.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because we've accepted the minutes and not released them in the past. I know that.
Okay.
Separate motions.
Okay. I know they're separate motions. I thought you released them first and then, but accepted them, but that's.
Okay. Well, I can certainly.
We accept the minutes of August 13th.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Now, any amendments to the minutes? Hearing none. Lee, aye.
Hands aye.
Ventresco, aye.
Varela,
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sheedy, aye.
Carol?
Lundin, aye.
Okay. Hey, everybody in? All right. So now the question is, do we release them?
What you need to consider is whether the purpose for going into executive session still persists. And if it does not, then you need to release them. And I think everyone would agree, based on the last meeting where we discussed the project, that the purpose for going into executive session has ceased to exist
I don't
or
see
be
any
meaningful.
interest in moving forward with any kind of purchase. So if that's the case, then we should release them.
I make a motion, we release the minutes of August 13th.
Second. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Lee, aye.
Ventresco, aye.
Hands aye.
Varela, aye.
Sheedy, aye.
Lundin, aye.
Okay. You want me to call a roll? Would that be helpful? Or just,
Dennis didn't vote this time, so I don't know if
okay.
he's back in school or not. So
I'll do that, speed things up. All right. So we now have the September 10th minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the September 10th minutes as written.
second,
Okay. Thank you, Ed. Any adjustments to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. Lee, aye. Ed?
aye.
Dennis?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Meredith?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That was just the order in my screen, so don't take offense. All right, I think that's all that's on the agenda, and I think we have our next meeting already set. Any other business at all, or shall we move to adjournment?
When is the next meeting? Because I'm pretty sure it's not October 15th, which is what I had in my calendar.
Yeah, I had that.
November 12th.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Lee, aye. Ed?
Aye.
Dennis?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Meredith?
Aye.
Thank you. And thanks, Wayne, and thanks, Stephanie.
Welcome. Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Have a great
Stay
night.
Stay
Be
well.
Bye.